Well, welcome to our last lesson in Pineview Parenting as we have gone through the Adventures in Parenting curriculum. We are on the last lesson, which is modeling, as the last M of the RPM3 model. If you've been following along, you know what the R, the P, and the other M stand for, and so we're on the last M of the lesson of the series. So excited about that. Think back when you were a kid. When you were a kid and you're growing up, I wanted to be like blank when you grew up. Could have been a fictional character, could have been an athlete, could have been a parent, could have been friends' parents. I remember I had a friend that it just seems like his parents had it all together. They had a nicer house than we did. They had nicer cars than we did. When I walked into their house, it actually smelled nice, you know. And I remember thinking, golly, why is my life not like this, you know? And so sometimes when we grow up, when we're kids, we look at people. They could be fictional people, athletes, whoever, and we're kind of like, when I grow up, I want to be like that person. Do you have someone that you thought of that when you were a kid that was kind of like a role model like that for you?
No, really.
Not really? Yeah, that's all right. Well, my biggest one was Superman. When I was a kid, like there really wasn't internet. And of course, even if there was internet, my parents weren't going to have it. We didn't have internet. We didn't have cell phones, stuff like that. But every Saturday, I got my allowance on Fridays. And every Saturday, me and my best friend next door, we'd ride our little bikes down to our little grocery store in our little tiny town in Michigan. And we would buy a $1.25 comic book and a 75-cent pop. Because we had $2. That's what we did. And man, we would just dive into those comic books, and we loved superheroes, but my favorite was Superman. And this Superman was like, I don't know, there was something about him. He was, not only was he like super powerful, he was bulletproof, and he could fly and super strong and all that. But I remember reading some of the comics, and not only was he powerful, but he was so darn good. He was so good. He would do things that even I was like, boy, I don't know if I would go that far. And he would save a kitten out of a tree, as well as stop a runaway train. He wasn't just doing the big stuff. He would do the little stuff too. As comics evolved and they got into some deeper issues, I remember one issue where Superman flew down and he actually talked a girl down from committing suicide. And that's what the whole comic was about. No aliens, no lasers, no fighting. It was a conversation. And I'm like, good night. I'll never forget November 1992. Oh, it just crushed me. That was when they released the comic book where Superman died. He died in the early 90s. And they were alluding to something big coming. Because, remember, we have internet. We couldn't look up. There's no spoilers. Right. We just had to go week by week by week and what was going to happen next. And that's how they got you to buy comic books, right? They leave you on cliffhangers every single week. I remember there was a story series with this big, bad, scary alien that, like the other superheroes were just getting wasted. They just couldn't take care of him. And Superman finally came into the picture, and I'm like, he's going to take care of him. He's going to get him. Superman never fails. He's my idol. He's my superhero. He's my model for. I knew I couldn't fly, but I liked his movement in life, and he used his power for good, and he faced this really strong alien, and he did end up defeating the alien, but in the process, Superman died. And I'll never forget the last part of the comic book. It was a double page picture, and it showed Superman kind of falling backwards, and the last little part down at the bottom, it said, and this was the day that a Superman died. And I remember as a kid, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And I'm like looking, like, is this real? Is it like a dream? Is it like another dimension? Like comic books will do that sort of thing. But no, in the comic book real world, he actually died. He sacrificed. Oh man, so my idol was taken from me. Well, in comic book style, of course, in one way or another, he did come back to life, thankfully. But in that moment, I remember just thinking, if Superman can die, whoa, what chance do I have? What chance do I have in becoming this invincible movement in the world? And it was almost like a reality check for me. So in November of 1992, I was 10 years old. I was about ready to turn 11 in December. So I was 10 years old. And I remember realizing that even my idols, even my mentors, my models, they can be defeated. And I'm like, good night. You know, that just stuck with me. That just stuck with me forever. I'm still a big fan of Superman, but made me think about models and idols and our kids. And our kids do, they do, as imperfect as we may be, they look up to us. They just do. So our kids, oftentimes, it might not be Superman, it might be an athlete, but a lot of times it is our parents, whether we like it or not. they look up to us, they do. And sometimes it can be a bittersweet moment when we realize that our kids are watching us. They're watching us, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes it's scary, and sometimes it's not so good. It just depends. But we do need to understand that we are modeling for our kids, really, in part, in a great part actually, who they're going to become as they become adults. Some parents are more clued in on this than others, and unfortunately, sometimes parents are so clued in on it that they do become a little paranoid. They become paranoid, and they're worried about, oh, if I mess up even once, oh, it's all for naught, and my children are going to end up, just in the gutter somewhere. But no, it's not what it is. Because you remember the very first thing we learned in this series was what? There is no what?
Perfect parent.
No perfect parent. No perfect parent. But that doesn't mean there's not responsibility. There's still responsibility. There's still things that we need to pay attention to. And if we're going to be a role model, if we're going to be that model for our kids, it really does matter what we do and don't do. A great responsibility comes with that modeling. So some parents are more clued in on that than others. And so that's why we're talking about this last. Children learn, I would argue, more from your actions than they do your words. Words are important. Words convey meaning. You get that. But our kids, they don't always listen to us. They don't always listen to us. But I guarantee this, mark it down, they always watch us. They may not always listen to us, but they always watch us. So in your blanks there, children tend to learn more from your actions than they do your words. And our kids, whether we like it or not, watch us all the time. All the time. Good, bad, indifferent. They watch us all, and I'll say this, all the stinking time.
Yeah.
All the stinking time. Even when they don't physically see you do something, they're going to hear about it. They're going to hear about it from the grapevine one way or another. Whether we like it or not, our kids do watch us. And, and as that, whether we realize it or not, we are a role model. It's just what it is. When we decided to have kids, we, maybe realizing it or not, we volunteered ourselves to be placed in this position of role modeling. It comes with the territory. It comes with being a parent. Even absent parents. I was doing a life skills lesson yesterday. I was talking about fathers because, I teach primarily boys here. So I was talking about fathers. And I said, whether you guys realize it or like it or not, whether your dad was a good dad or whether he really hurt you in one way or another, or whether you don't even know him. You don't even know whether, it doesn't matter. No parent can escape the reality of the responsibility of being a role model. Some parents try to. They say, it'd be better if someone else raised my kid, or I'm going to leave, I'm going to just be absent, or whatever it is. There's something inside of us that is still attached to our biological parents. You see this with adoptive kids a lot, or kids in the foster care. An adoptive kid, they can have the best adoptive parents. The best adoptive parents. They can be taken care of. All their needs are met. Everything's taken care of, relationally, and these adoptive parents are just pouring into this kid. But that kid will always have something inside of him that says, why did my biological give me up? Even if they passed away, how dare they die? How dare they abandon me? There's this deep psyche in us that is built in. We can't escape it. There's an attachment to our biological parents, whether we like it or not, whether we want to or not. It's not even logical. Like that adoptive kid, he's got everything he needs, got everything she needs, taken care of in all the aspects. It's illogical, but there's still this emotional, psychological attachment to our biologicals, whether we realize it or like it or not. It's just what it is. All too often, parenting behavior is guided by adults, those parents, reacting to their own childhoods. All too often, how we parent, how we interact with our kids is subconsciously, and we may not know where it's coming from, but subconsciously, it's coming from our own childhood. It's how we were raised. And oftentimes we think, well, that's how my daddy did it, or that's how whoever raised me did it. That's what happened. And so that's what I'm going to do. And there's some good things there, but there's some not so good things there. But whether we like it or not, oftentimes we become our parents in one way or the other. It could be a reaction to a pain that we had when we were kids. We have these things, if I had a whiteboard behind me, I'd draw a heart with these little lines coming off it. Our hearts, or our innermost being, our souls, whatever you want to call it, has what's called longings. And so and there's common longings, like a common longing that everyone has is a longing to love and be loved. We have that longing. We want to be loved and we want to love. That everyone across the board, whether we deny it, push it down, whatever, we have that longing. Well, what happens is when pain enters our lives in that realm of longing, it's like you have your heart and here's the longing, and that connection to your heart and that longing can get injured, can get hurt, like a nerve in our bodies. When you hit that nerve, like hit your funny bone, you're like, and that nerve will vibrate and it'll shake, and that goes to your heart and says, I don't like that feeling. And oftentimes we'll blame it even on the longing itself. So what can happen is, for example, if you have a longing, we'll just use love and be loved. You want to love and be loved. So you enter some relationship with someone and they betray you. That does happen. They betray you, so they're hurting, they're cutting on that nerve ending. So what some people will do is they can't sever completely that nerve ending. They can't say, I don't have that longing. Now, they may not actively feel it at the time, but it's still there. So what they'll do is they'll board it up. They'll lock it down. They'll say, this longing, they put it in a cage, and they put that cage in the cage, and they build a wall around that, and they have guns facing out. No one's going to touch that longing because I was hurt in the past, because that nerve ending was hit to a point that went down to my heart and destroyed me, you could say, internally. No one's ever going to touch that longing again. It's not worth the risk. What that's called is a never again statement. Never again will I feel that pain or my kids. So what can happen is our past trauma, and we all have it, childhood, adult, whatever, but especially childhood trauma, that past trauma, we can swing the pendulum maybe sometimes too far based out of fear, because it's a good motive. Like, we don't want to feel pain. We don't want our kids to feel pain. If we were abused or something happened in our childhood, sexual abuse, victims of childhood sexual abuse, they will have these never again statements. Never again will I be victimized in this way. And you better believe my kids won't be either. And they become this, maybe even a helicopter parent, Some of that's good. I mean, don't let your kids go to risky places, right? We get that, because that does happen. But the pendulum could be swung too far to where a parent becomes, so protective that they don't allow their kids to live out calculated risks. That's a good way to say it. And your son is right at the age where you need to allow him to start doing some calculated risks. I mean,
He took enough.
well, I mean, sorry. I mean, he's growing up. This is what it is. I get it. Yeah. But when they're 3 or 4, it's different, you know. But when they become preteens, teenagers, whatever, calculated, maybe a good word, supervised, normal, risky behavior. I think I've said it before, but I'll never forget my son in the race car. I mean, he was 14 years old. You know, I mean, strapping my 14-year-old kid into a race car with a fire suit and a 5-point harness and a helmet and gloves, and he's looking at me with 14-year-old eyes. Pooh. But it was a calculated risk. I knew he'd get hurt, and he did a couple little times. Launched off the track, hit the wall. It happens. But if I would have said, "No, son, you can't race that race car," or "No, you can't play football," or "You can't go fishing because when I was a kid I got a hook in my foot," or whatever, something from our childhood, something from our past. If we say, "No, you can't," because of the fear of the potential of whatever, we're actually doing our kids a disservice. We're detrimenting them. And they could do one of two things. They would either cling to mom and dad in an unhealthy way, and you'll never get them out of the house when they're 30 years old, or they're going to say, "I'm out." They'll break, and they'll say, "I'm going to go do it anyway." We don't want either. We want to teach our kids a movement into life, and a lot of that has to do with how we model ourselves. I would let my kids watch me take calculated risks, and I would show them sometimes, "I'm going to do this thing. I'm not sure how it's going to work out, but here's why I think it's a good idea." And I would have good reason, and I would talk to them about it in a kid way, you know. We would do the pros and the cons. We would do how high of a risk is this, etc. And by doing that with them, I think it's helped them. My son's 19. Today's his birthday, actually. He turned 19 today. He's doing life. My daughter is moving through life, and they're doing it in a way that is, I think, relatively healthy and balanced. Do they do things that I don't want them to? Do they scare me sometimes? Yes, absolutely. My son is 4,000 miles away. If something happens, what am I going to do? You know, but I trust them enough to where I say, "Go get him, kid," you know? All right. But all too often, our parenting behavior is guided by us reacting to our own childhoods. If you remember the responding and reacting lesson, that would help, because even reacting to what's presently happening, we also psychologically will react to our own traumas, our own childhood traumas, and that sort of thing. And the better way, if you remember way back at the first or the second lesson, was there's reacting, which is emotion based. It's not thought through. It's just rah, rah, rah. And a lot of times we regret what we do or say if we react. But if we respond, that gives us time. Our emotions come down. Our logic goes up. And we're able to actually respond to not only our own junk, our own trauma and childhood stuff, but also obviously our kids that are there. My kids don't know everything that happened in my childhood because it's just not healthy for them to know, you know. So, you know, I'm not going to divulge details, you know, and whatever, but they do know that, you know, Dad's been through some stuff. And some of it's been, as they gotten older, told them a little bit more, but I don't have this you know, this strong emotional desire to word vomit on them with all my trauma. I don't think that's healthy either. Depending on how old they are. Maybe when they're like actual adults, you know, maybe we'll talk more about it if it comes up. But when they're kids, that might not be necessary, you know. Okay. All right, let's see here. We already talked about don't need to be a perfect parent. So let's talk about some ways that we as parents can practice being good role models. We're talking about modeling. That's the last M again, is modeling our own behavior, conduct, that sort of thing. So here's some ways that we can be that kind of role model that is good for our kids. Number one, and this is fill in the blank for you there, the letter A, do as you say and say as you do. Do as you say and say as you do. Basically, this is just being consistent in your own actions. The opposite with this would be don't swear, and then you swear on the phone 2 minutes later. Or don't smoke, and then you go out and smoke. Or, don't do this or don't do that. And then you're just wasting your time at that point. I mean, it is what it is. You can tell them all day long what to not do or even what to do. But if you're not doing that, if you're not, you really are just spinning your wheels in the mud, because kids will listen. They'll watch us. They'll learn from our actions much more than our words. So really, if we tell them to do something or not do it, but we're doing that thing, I mean, really, we're just being hypocritical. I mean, that's really all it is. This could be everything from how we react to the person at McDonald's that got our order wrong. It could be that. It could be you get bad news, and you better believe it. When there's bad news in the house, I don't care if the kid is not in the room, they can feel it. There's something. And so, something happened. What is it? You receive bad news, whatever it is, and you better believe it. Have you ever seen your kid's eyes just looking at you when you're maybe telling them what the bad news is? Well, the reason they're looking at you, it's not so much the information you're giving them, because really our kids, they can understand things, but they can't yet think abstractly. They think concretely. So it's black and white, right, wrong, that sort of thing. To our adults, as they get, for girls, it's their mid-20s, guys, it's their late 20s, we begin to be able to think abstractly. Empathy, you talked about empathy earlier. Your boy can practice showing empathy and being trained in that way. Perfect time to do that. But for him to naturally, I have seen a couple boys show glimmers of empathy, but it's not fully developed yet. That's an abstract thought. And so it's time to train them and teach them this is how to do it. Teach them verbally, but also show it. So if you want your boy to be empathetic towards somebody, look for opportunities where you can be empathetic towards someone else. And they guarantee they'll watch you like a hawk. Okay, mom did this, dad did that. It's similar to my situation, so that's how I'm going to model myself. It's pretty amazing how it works. One thing that I did with my kids growing up is there was certain things I just didn't want as part of their life when they got older. So that means when I was a young parent, when they were little, that sort of thing, I just didn't have a part of my life. It could be anything from substances to swearing, being kind in public. That's kind of a little bit of soapbox for me. So many people are so unkind in public, whether it's at a restaurant or store or whatever. And so even when something went wrong, and even if my blood pressure rose, I'm a stickler for good service. It's just who I am. And when I don't get good service, and it's not difficult to give good service, I get agitated. And my kids can tell when I'm irritated, but I might be direct a little, but I never raise my voice. I never belittle anybody. I'm just like, this is incorrect, and this is how I recommend it's fixed. That kind of thing, and so hopefully my kids kind of take that. So I need to do, if I'm telling them to do something, I need to do that too, within reason, right? There are some things that adults can do, but I say it this way. There may be certain things in your life that is okay or legal or whatever for an adult to do. Adults can do certain things, whatever. But while we're raising kids, our needs are not the priority. In that chapter of our life, could be relationship stuff. I know a lady that she's so, what's the right word, addicted. She's so desperate for a partner, for a relationship. It's not a bad thing, right? I mean, the longing to be loved and be loved, to love and be loved. So that's not a bad thing. But because she's so obsessed with it, basically, and she has kids, she brings in these guys, and then it doesn't work out, and then they're gone, and another guy comes in, and it doesn't work out, and then he's gone. And so what she's doing is she's so obsessed with her own longing that she's forgetting that her kids are actually the priority in this chapter of her life. A wiser thing for her to do would be to say, okay, well, my kids are this age, whatever it is, and unless Mr. Right just kind of falls in my lap, but I'm going to be protective. My kids are the priority. My home is the priority. I'm going to just say no to that right now. That's just not part of my life. It's still a longing. It's okay to long for that. It's okay to have even the emotional desire for that, but not at the expense of our kids. It's just bottom line. If it is a detriment, if it's a negative movement in our kids' lives, it doesn't belong in your house. It's bottom line. When we decided to be parents, we decided for this chapter of our life, we come second or maybe third or whatever it is. Our kids come first. So we have to be careful with that. We don't want to just tell our kids what to do. We want to do it. Kind of think about it like this. Do you want your kids to be going through life the way you are, either currently or when you were younger? And if there's things that, oh no, I wouldn't like it if, like this other lady I know, bringing in a guy, think about a daughter. Do I want my daughter to be bringing in guys and not bringing in guys? And heck no, I don't. What a terrible situation that would be. So I'm not going to allow that sort of thing in my life. So in this chapter of my life, it can be difficult. I get it. You say no to those certain things so you can prioritize your kids. And that chapter, like a chapter in a book, one day you'll finish it. You'll finish that chapter, and then you can move on to another chapter. As our kids get older, you can see that chapter ending closer and closer. My son's 19. He turned 19 today. My daughter will be 18 in 10 months. Legally, my chapter is almost done as far as like raising minor children. I'll always be a dad, right? I mean, my son still calls me and stuff, and I hope he always does. And I hope my daughter does too. But when they're kids, we come second or third. Okay, enough of that. Second way that you can practice being a good role model is to show respect to other people, including your child. This kind of goes along with being respectful in public, kind of a thing. But the thing about it is, because our kids, they can't think abstractly yet, they don't know what it means when we say the word respect. They really don't. Respect me as mom, respect me as dad. Okay, well, they don't really understand what that means. They may understand that, okay, the current thing I'm doing, mom doesn't like, right? I remember I was walking into Menards a couple weeks ago, and I'm kind of observant of people, and I saw this mom. I heard her. Okay, that's how it wasn't difficult to not see what was going on. She's getting out of the car, and there's already loud voices, and I'm a couple aisles away or whatever, out in the parking lot, and I'm going kind of her direction. She's coming this way. And she had two kind of a preteen girl and then a smaller boy, and I didn't really catch a lot of it, but I remember hearing clearly, loudly, her say, I am the blank parent, insert curse word. I am the blank parent. You will blank and respect me. And I remember just like, good night, And so, I know that this parenting class, and I'm kind of thinking about it and stuff. And I'm like, does she want that preteen daughter to talk like that? Like, no, what she was asking for wasn't bad. And was the girl being disrespectful? Probably, at least in her interpretation. But in a public parking lot with a smaller boy right there, with people mingling around and very loudly and throwing a couple pretty significant swear words, she meant good, so to speak, because she's trying to teach her daughter maybe what respect is. But she did it in a way that taught her the opposite, just absolutely the opposite. So showing respect to others and your kid is paramount, because how you respect them, how you respect others, is how they're going to when they get older. If you blow up at the girl behind the counter at McDonald's, they're going to blow up at the girl at the counter at McDonald's. It's just what it's going to be. I think it's important too when it comes to respect. Respect doesn't mean you always agree. It doesn't always mean you agree. So my daughter, there's things that she may do or want to do or whatever, and I'm like, I just don't really agree with that. But you have to also gauge how quote unquote bad it is or whatever. What's a good example? dress, maybe how our kids dress. As they get older, they start dressing themselves and that sort of thing, and they pick their outfits and whatever. And there's sometimes I'm like, it's just, but to respect her, and she's older, obviously, and this was even when she was a little younger. I may not agree with what she's doing, and there's boundaries, obviously, and there's limits. But I may not agree with whatever, and I'd like to see her wear something else. But hey, I'm gonna respect her individuality. I'm gonna respect who she is as a person. So I'm gonna pick my battles. So we're gonna respect our kids in numerous ways, and that's just one of them. I want to read this little thing. It's pretty good on page 21. It's one of these did you knows. It says, children are great copycats. Have you ever said a curse word in front of your child only to hear him or her repeat that word later? And I like this, usually at the worst possible time. I've been there. Kids are highly imitative with both words and actions. If you are aggressive, your child may copy you to be aggressive too. If you are very social, your child will probably be social too. Make sure you are strong, consistent, and a positive role model to foster better behaviors in your child. This is training time. This is training time for our kids. They're not ready to raise themselves. They're not ready. They need training and guidance from primarily mom and dad. That's where it primarily comes from. Okay. How much time we got? Okay, three more. Ways to, that was what B was, show respect to your child and others. Number 3, or C, is be honest with your child about how you are feeling. Be honest and genuine with your kids about your emotions. Now, I want to throw this out there while keeping proper boundaries. We don't divulge everything to our kids. We don't, there's certain boundaries that we keep with them. But we find that emotions, how we're feeling, obviously affect our kids, and they may not understand the complexity of how we're feeling. And so it's okay to kind of talk to them about how we're feeling and that sort of thing. Recently, my daughter asked me, how do you feel about that? And we had just some kind of annoying news, you could say, family-wise. And I was thinking about it, and I think maybe she saw the expression on my face, and I wasn't like throwing a fit or anything. I was just kind of processing the news or whatever, and we were thinking about it, and I was thinking about it, and then a little bit later, she goes, how do you feel about that? She wanted to know. And I was glad she knew, because, of course, our kids took it to the nth degree, where it wasn't that. Like, she was like, are you like really upset about that? Like, did that destroy your soul? And I'm like, oh, no, and maybe the look on my face or something, but she thought it was much worse than maybe what it was. And so that was nice that she asked, because that gave me opportunity to be honest with her about my feelings. And because I clearly communicated how I was feeling, then that took her from a level 7, maybe stress, and it brought her down to a 4, just by me explaining that. So I think it's good to talk to our kids about our feelings. One thing I would do, we would do family meetings, and one thing I would do with my kids is we do a family meeting, we talk about whatever, but sometimes I would just sit with my daughter more, my son some, and I would say to her, tell me 3 things about your feelings, like emotional stuff. What do you mean? And I just, tell me 3 things. Like, tell me about your day. Tell me a time you felt happy. Tell me a time you felt sad. Tell me a time that you felt embarrassed. I mean, whatever. Tell me a time that you felt excited. Tell me 3 things. And if it wasn't that day, this week, whatever. And I wouldn't leave the conversation until, and they knew this, until I had 3 things. Then we kind of talk about it. So it's important to talk to our kids about their feelings and to be honest with them about ours. I think that's smart. Number 4, and this is when they pull out, I think it's important about emotions. They pull out anger, because a lot of times anger can be a theme, unfortunately, in some households. Anger is like the emotion that, actually I think depression is starting to compete with it, but it seems like anger is the highest dealt with negative emotion in a household. It's just what it is. So what we have to remember with our kids, especially depending on their age, with that brain development, with how they understand things, that abstract versus concrete thinking, that emotional versus logical thinking, oftentimes how they feel is their truth. And if we're angry at them, even rightly so, they may internalize that and feel as if we are rejecting them as a person. There's a big difference. Like adults, we can be upset at each other. We can do something we don't like or whatever, and you can be mad at this person, but it might not necessarily you reject them as a person. It just means this thing you did made me mad, you know? But kids oftentimes, because their world is quote unquote smaller than ours, it's more simple, it's more concrete. If mom is mad at me, she's mad at my identity. She doesn't like me as a person. It can go that way. And so we have to make sure that we do things, say things that not only communicates the truth about maybe something they did that upset us, but also at the same time holding them up as I don't reject you. You're still my son. You're still my daughter. I still accept you, even though you may have done wrong, if that makes sense. And our boys, you know, especially in placement, they deal with the feelings of rejection all the time, all the time. It's just part of the game. It's part of the nature of the industry that we deal with. And you can tell them, like we said, you can tell them all day long something, and it's not going to connect. I'm really mad at you. I love you. I always love you, but I'm really mad at you. It's like they didn't even hear that, you know, you love them. You have to show it. You have to show it. And one of the things that it really drives me crazy is when parents get mad at a kid, and rightly so. Kid does something they shouldn't, whatever it is. Maybe it's on a visit or something, and the parents are upset. They messed up. Well, I'm not going to come and visit him for 3 weeks. And I'm like, and I tell them, I don't think that's a good idea, because that is just bolstering that belief that when mom or dad are angry with me, I'm no good, I'm rejected, they don't want me. It happens more times than we care to admit, but anger does not equal rejection. And somehow, through actions, more than words, we need to communicate that to our kids. Showing up when you're angry is a really good way to show them that they're not rejected. And that would be even at home. Something happens in the afternoon, there's a tiff, a fight, whatever it is, you're mad at your kid, he goes to his room. Well, in a half hour, you better go to that room and give him a hug or something. Hey, I'm still here. I still love you. That sort of thing. So anger does not equal rejection. And we have to remember with children too, their timeline is different than ours. And the reason that is because the percentage is greater. So for example, a 10-year-old, 1 year is a tenth of their life. So time seems longer to children, to where a 50-year-old, 5 years is a tenth of their life. So time seems slower. Or faster, faster. So for kids, time is different. So 5 minutes could seem like an hour to a kid. So us as parents, sometimes we have to give ourselves a timeout, but we're on a timeline that says, I need an hour to myself. Okay, well, an hour to a kid could feel like a day. So just keep that in mind when it comes to reconnecting with our kids. They work on a different timeline than we do, and it's because of the percentage thing. Okay, last one to mention about how parents can be good role models. Point out bad role models. Basically, talk about poor role models. Pinpoint things that you would not want to see your kid do when you observe it in the real world. If I would have had my daughter with me, with the lady that was walking into Menards, I would have said, that wasn't good, and here's why. You know, I would have told her. And hopefully she would say, well, I would never see dad act like that. So that strengthened that lesson. And then if there's a bad example that, you know, I didn't create, no, you know, I mean, you know, it may sound kind of judgy, but it's just what it is. There's a bad role model. Let's talk about that for a minute. And, you know, we have to be wise with this, because sometimes our kids like certain musicians, and you do a little Google search on a certain musician, it's like, oh my goodness. So I wouldn't say you have to immediately ban all music from someone who you don't agree with or whatever, or is a bad role model, but talk to them about it. That's fine. My daughter, when she was real little, is when Justin Bieber just came out. Is when he was like 14 or whatever. And my little daughter, she was like 4 or 5, and she loved I still remember seeing her on a swing, and she was singing the Baby Baby song, and she's like, baby, baby. She's like 4 or 5. And I remember she liked that song and whatever, and that's fine and whatever. Well, then it came out in the news that something happened with Justin Bieber. Not right then, but a couple years down the road or whatever. I don't remember what it was, but it was an example of a bad role model. I don't even remember. I think he's really fallen off the rails now, but whatever. She's not into him anymore, that she admits anyway. But I remember I'm like, oh, what do I do here? Because here's my little 4 or 5-year-old singing this song with this guy that really isn't a good role model. What do I do? And I chose not to do anything at that point because of her age. It's just a fun song for her. She's not Googling about him. She just hears the song, whatever. So the song itself was harmless. But if she would have been like 13, 14 years old, of course, then she's going to be on social media. Of course, she's going to be on the internet. And not only do they listen to the music or play the video games or whatever it is, but they know all about it too at that point. So that's when you'd have that conversation and maybe eliminate, a bad role model. It's really up to you. You just have to be wise in that. Okay, that is, I think, really about all I want to say about that. The only other thing is that you could say too, when it comes to pointing out poor role models, is also along with the being honest with your child about your own emotions and feelings and your own childhood and that sort of thing. If you mess up and you happen to be a bad role model in a moment, talk to them about it. Hey, I messed up. I got irritated in traffic, and I popped off some words I shouldn't have. I'm sorry you had to hear that. That's not what I should have done. And just be honest with them. Pinpoint when we mess up, because we're going to mess up. There's no perfect parent, so we're going to mess up sometimes. But if we just accept that imperfection as part of life, well, then that's what they're going to do. Well, it's just part of life. To where if we say, no, it's not what I should have done, it's not what I should do, whatever it is, and just be honest with them about it, and then make efforts to eliminate that from our life, whatever that is, our kids will see that. Our kids will definitely see that. So very good. Okay. Questions, comments? Okay. Well, very good. Well, that wraps up all of the Pineview Parenting, the Adventures in Parenting, ending with modeling, and I hope it's been helpful. And of course, it's on the YouTube. All the lessons are on there, and I'm going to leave them on there for quite a while. It's on the Pineview YouTube page, which I think is linked off of the website. But thanks for joining us, and have a great day.